Welcome everyone. We are going to present on conditional constructs to the rescue. My name is Priti Desai and I work for IBM.
And my name is Jerop Kipruto and I work for Google.
Thanks, Jerop. So we are going to talk about Tekton and conditional constructs in Tekton. So let's see, what is Tekton? Tekton is, if you Google for Tekton, it shows you as a tooling company. But wait, are we tooling company? We are not. Actually, we are. So we are a tooling company, but we build tools. We build framework to facilitate to facilitate CI/CD use cases or CI/CD pipelines. So basically, it's a software tooling. So let's see what is a Tekton pipeline. So Tekton pipeline is basically a collection of tasks, and Tekton pipeline we represent any CI/CD use case we represent using Tekton pipeline. Now think beyond a sequence of tasks. Tekton pipeline it's one of the core building blocks of Tekton, and it's being a collection of tasks, and each task actually executes a pod on a Kubernetes cluster. And in programming paradigm, a task is a kind of a library which can be shared across multiple pipelines. Task is a collection of step, and step represents container images. Basically, it can have multiple steps and can run multiple container images, running specific tooling on set of inputs, and basically produces outputs. So this looks good. Basically, pipeline being a graph. Here, scheduling is a key now because it's not a list or a sequence of tasks. So when all the tasks runs fine, runs successful, basically everything gets executed. But what if something fails? Pipeline needs to decide what needs to be done next. So to kind of help with this scheduling, we have designed and implemented a few conditional constructs. And those conditional constructs helped solve common CI/CD use cases. For example, control or guard a particular task depending on what the prior processing looks like. Whether something says that, okay, go ahead and execute or not. So basically, one of the conditional constructs helped us design these kind of use cases. The other common use case is we want to design a generic pipeline and utilize in many different environments or regions or cloud providers. And one more key use case is execute something before exiting the pipeline. And so if there is a single failure, but we would like to execute something even beyond that failure. So here we have conditional constructs to our rescue. Now, next, Jerop will take you to the next slide. Jerop?
Thank you, Priti. For this next slide and content, we are going to explore exactly how conditional constructs have come to our rescue by looking at how we build a Tekton pipeline, and then secondly, how conditional constructs have come to our rescue, and particularly looking at when expressions in Tekton and finally tasks in Tekton. Thirdly, we look at a demo to demonstrate some of the use cases that we'll talk about. And lastly, we look at what's next in Tekton pipeline conditional constructs. So for a standard CI/CD use case, it usually involves building an image, then running end-to-end tests, and finally deploying that image. In Tekton, we have a task to clone a repository into a workspace, and the workspace is a shared persistent volume shared across all the tasks. Secondly, we have a task to build an image based on the workspace and publish it to an image registry. Thirdly, we have a task to run end-to-end tests using that image. And lastly, a task that deploys that image to dev or staging environment, depending on your use case. Additionally, we could have a task to deploy that image to a particular region, depending on the use case. When we have this pipeline, then in Tekton, we have pipeline runs that instantiates this pipeline and reports success or failure based on the execution of each task. So if all the tasks are successful, then the pipeline run reports success. And if any of the tasks fails, then we will the pipeline run exits on the first task failure. So what we provided in Tekton is when expression, and particularly we look at how it uses parameters, and in this use case to build or enable us to create a generic pipeline to be used for multiple regions. So in the previous example, what we had is that it was just deploying to one region, but in this case, we could be in a situation where we want to deploy to a couple of regions. So when expressions allows you to specify inputs, operator, and values to be able to do this and have a generic pipeline. And when we can do this for like region parameter, probably we could also pass in cluster parameter or even cloud provider parameter. So for demonstration purposes, though, we will look at particularly the region parameter. This, I would have to say, was possible without when expressions. Previously, we used to use condition CRD, but when expressions bring simplicity and efficiency without wasting the resources used to spin up pods for evaluating checks. So if we look at this example and we want to deploy to a particular region, then the flow of execution would be as follows. And you can see that one of the deploy tasks is skipped while the other one is executed. So what if we're looking at a situation where the deciding factor is not a parameterized string and there's some kind of automation to compute a value that needs to be used in when expressions? So what happens in this case is that you can use task results and have them substituted in when expressions and used to evaluate whether to execute or skip a task. In this example, check repo produces results exists and region, which is then used to guard build image task and the deploy tasks that we have at the end. So in the case where the file exists and we want to deploy to S, this will be the flow of automation, as you can see here. Then everything runs to green and it's only deploy is that is skipped. But when we're in a situation where the file is missing and therefore exist is set to no, you'd find that build image is skipped and everything afterwards is skipped as well. Finally, we're going to look into how finally tasks are used to even provide more conditional constructs and capabilities, and we'll have Priti talk about that.
All right, thanks, Jerop. So let's so far we saw how a task can be guarded, basically guarded task in a pipeline, and also design generic pipeline for different environments using when expressions. Now, let's revisit the graph we saw earlier in the presentation. Now, here, the scheduling here, basically everything is green, everything is successful, it looks great. But what if something fails? Basically, rest of the tasks are skipped, they are not run, they're not executed. But there are a lot of CI/CD use cases in which we would like to have something, basically something running even beyond a single failure. So we actually, and one of the common use case is basically the cleaning up. Irrespective of success or failure, we would like to clean up our resources. So here, we, to kind of help us implement this kind of functionality, we implemented something called finally tasks. So now we have two sections. We have DAG tasks and we have finally tasks. The entire graph runs. If something fails, what happens is basically the finally tasks are executed. The DAG task, everything runs, everything is successful, but we still run anything that is specified under the finally section. So basically, it guarantees that anything we have specified under finally section is getting executed. So here, for example, everything green finally is executing, cleaning up is done. But which is not the case, right? Hardly it's the case in real world. So here it shows that, something failed. Now an integration test failed. So we skip the deployment, but we still run cleanup. Now here the key is the exit status. What happens is one of the DAG tasks failed. The pipeline run exits with failure. Let's say if everything was successful, DAG tasks runs, all the DAG tasks run fine, successfully, but one of the finally tasks fail. Pipeline run would still exit with failure because it's one of the tasks in the entire pipeline. Even though it's a different section, but it's still part of the same pipeline. So finally does influence the exit status. One of the other main use case or key use case is sending notification, or kind of, so here the idea is we would like to kind of get some information based on whatever the DAG tasks are, they execute, and then they produce some results. We would like to communicate that result to finally task. So this feature was introduced to help kind of, let's say a project is created, and that project name was basically needs to be communicated to the finally task. So here it is, this project, here is the project, now go ahead and clean that up. Or notification, here is my PR number, and basically send notification to this PR author, and here's the number. So so basically communication is the key, and that's why the results or any processing or any output from the DAG is communicated to finally. So let's look at demo all these use cases. We have kind of, we have put together a demo to show you the deployment, and also basically how it looks on dashboard, and also Tekton CLI. So I'm going to play this. Here, this is the GitHub repo that I have all the pipelines, all the sample pipelines stored, and here we are running deployment. So our first use case is being deployed. Let's look at on the dashboard what's happening. So here we're cloning the repo. The cloning is done, and this is the repo that was cloned. Now we are building an image which has basically a sample hello world kind of application in Golang. Now, once this is done, yes, go ahead and deploy it because build was successful. So deploy, okay, we are deploying this image and then we create a service on this port, expose this port so that we can access it. Now, basically go and basically access that application and see if it's running. Okay, yay. So now we have that application running and you can notice the time, local time here. And yes, hello CD call. Cool. Let's look at the other next use case. Deploy in a specific region. Deployment is happening. We have a pipeline designed for keeping 3 different regions in the pipeline, but we would only like to deploy in one region. Clone it from the GitHub URL, build an image. Now deploy, but deploy only in one region. And here is the node port. So now let's go. So it says the tasks were skipped because, of course, the regions were, the tasks were not deployed. So here, the Tekton CLI, it's basically, let's describe that pipeline run and says we would like to deploy in East, and then let's see, we should have East and Central as skipped. Let's verify. Yes, so our tasks for deploying in West and Central were skipped. And that application in the East region is accessible on this port. Okay, so now let's move on to the next use case. Here we are kind of guarding task. Basically, we do not want to build if something fishy, we see something fishy, for example, or something, so here we are cloning and we are running our check. Yes, clone from that repo and run our check. We actually found a bogus file. So if we find that kind of file, then yes, we basically exit out. We do not want to deploy, build or deploy. So now let's check. Yes, it was finished. And what happened? So we described that pipeline and we see that only 2, basically the clone and the check was successful. Now we would like to see whether the rest of the pipeline tasks were skipped. So build and deploy app image was there skipped. Okay, so now next use case, something fails in DAG tasks. So here we are deploying this particular pipeline. And look at on the dashboard, we're cloning Yes, now building an app image. Once this is built, we run end-to-end test. So here we have a kind of fake end-to-end test resulting in failure. And so now, yes, the building was successful. Run. Okay, so we exited with 1, so it basically resulted in failure. So deployment must be skipped, but clean up. We want to clean up our workspace, the persistent volume which was shared. So now clean that up, and then it basically says that the pipeline resulted in failure. So here, yes, that pipeline failed. And we describe that pipeline run. Yep, so here you see the reason why it was failed. And were there any skip tasks? That must be 1. Okay, so deployment was skipped. So basically, this kind of shows the overall use cases and how when expressions and finally are being useful here. So Jerop, you want to go?
Okay, thank you, Priti. So with what we've seen right now, we've looked at when expressions independently and finally tasks independently. And we've also seen that finally tasks are executed regardless of success or failure in the pipeline. What is coming up next is that we're looking into having when expressions in finally tasks to allow for conditional execution of finally tasks. An example use case is what we have here. For example, if when end-to-end tests or integration tests fail, you may want to create a GitHub issue. And in this case, we don't want to create the issue when it's successful. So we can have when expressions guarding finally tasks, which is a feature that is coming up soon. Additionally, something else that we're looking at is finally tasks timeout. We want to have a separate timeout to ensure that finally tasks actually execute, because currently it uses the same timeout as the DAG tasks. And looking at a situation where, for example, the integration tests run for too long and the pipeline times out, then the finally tasks won't be executed. But when you have a separate timeout for the finally tasks alone, then this will ensure that they actually execute even when the other parts time out. With what we've looked at, we can then use when expressions and finally tasks to create powerful pipeline graphs that can solve many complex CI/CD use cases. To try this out, you can check out the when expressions documentation in Tekton pipelines repo, as well as the finally task documentation. And we've also provided these pipelines with finally tasks and when expressions on a repo that you can access and also play around yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the presentation.
Hello.
Hey, Jerop.
Yeah, and we just also added more references to the linked slides in the event itself beyond what we had in the recording.
Yep, yeah, and the slides are available on the schedule, basically, so you can access it from there. And there is, so I would like to thank Bits of Info. He has posted his GitHub repo. He has a very in-depth knowledge of the the whole CI/CD state manager with Tekton. So I would like you to kind of look at his repo. And there was also a question in the chat about the converter. The question, let me read it. how can we convert a freestyle Jenkins job to a pipeline job? So the answer is there is no direct converter. You basically have to understand the design principles and kind of based on what job you're trying to convert, apply it to Tekton pipe.
Yeah,
Um,
and in the repo as well, we have like end-to-end examples that can demonstrate how these features can be used.
right. And any more questions, anyone? Yes, it's not intimidated by Tekton, basically. Yes, you can do a lot of, and it's still evolving. There are a lot of great features already in line, and it's actively being developed. And it's a great community. If you guys are interested, I've worked on open source from basically since past 5 years. I started working on Tekton last year, and the community is amazing. It's very warm, welcoming. Anything you do is appreciated. So feel free to kind of. And the Jerop posted a link to the slides. The references section has details on basically how to get started with Tekton and the repo and community repo.
Yeah, and finally, to what Priti said, that the community is very welcoming and you can get involved. There's a link that I just also added there to our community repo with more details on how you can participate in helping us shape Tekton.
Yeah.
Okay.
You, Jerop, you're in New York?
Yes, I'm in New York, and
How, yeah, I'm in California.
okay,
Yeah, we're on two different sides.
yeah. Um, I'm wondering, people in the chat, where are you coming from? Have you used conditional constructs before? Which tools do you
Yeah.
use for your CI/CD systems?
Yeah, feel free to post it on chat if you guys have used what kind of CI/CD system you guys are using and what is your experience? Happy, not happy? Yeah, I wish there was something like, hand raise thing where you can just raise your hand. Okay, so Bits of Info is saying used to do some Jenkins and now Tekton all the way. Great. Yay. Okay, Sergey is saying we use Spinnaker, but also using Tekton to extend some customer flows. That's great. Yeah, it's a fairly new project and a lot of move happening, and it's great.
Yeah. Maybe Christy, no, maybe Priti, you can share more about like your how long you've been with Tekton and like, what you've done with the project so far since you've been here longer.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey with Tekton. I started last year, October. It's been a year now, and I'm one of the owners in Tekton Pipeline. And there has been so many great features that I could basically be part of myself. And started with talking to Christy. She was awesome, and just getting into community, started attending working groups, and basically as I used to work on serverless, so that's where my experience coming from using Tekton, and we were missing a couple of features, and that's how I started getting involved in Tekton and kind of took it off. How about
Yeah.
you, Jared? You want to share
I'm
your
a new
story?
I'm a much newer contributor, as you know. I just joined March this year, but like with onboarding stuff, officially started contributing in April. But as Priti said, it's a very new project. There's a lot of things to be done, and the community is very welcoming and supportive. I've been able to work on big features even as a new contributor in the project, like when expressions in itself. So Yeah, I'm really excited about the direction that Tekton is going. We have a question from Paul about how we are integrating the two. So currently, when expressions are not supported in finally tasks, but as you saw, there's something that is currently in the works is supporting results in when expressions, and no, supporting results in finally tasks, like results from tasks that were in the DG. And once that is supported, then we can also introduce when expressions in finally tasks so that they can execute based on those results. So this is all actively ongoing work, particularly supporting results in finally tasks. And then the next step will be having when expressions there to guard whether finally tasks should execute or not. I don't know if Priti has anything to add.
Oh no, we are out of time actually. So yeah,
Okay.
Celia, yeah. Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining and have a great rest of the session.
Okay.
Thank you.